Hello, friends. My name is Callum, and I bring you mysterious and scary stories. As you know, it is the month of Christmas. I will tell you 3 true Christmas horror stories. Before starting the story, please like the video to encourage us. And if you have come to our channel for the first time, then subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon. So let's start the story. Every Christmas Eve, the small village of Hawthorne Hollow fell under a peculiar stillness. As snow blanketed the streets, families huddled by the warmth of their fireplaces, exchanging gifts and laughter. But this year, something was different. Hannah Blake, a young woman new to the village, had been invited to spend the holiday with the Harrington family, known for their grand manor perched atop a hill. The mansion, despite its beauty, had a strange air about it, as if the house itself was waiting for something. But Hannah, eager to escape the loneliness of her city apartment, accepted the invitation without hesitation. That night, after a hearty Christmas dinner, the family gathered by the grand piano. The children played games and the adults shared stories. But as the clock struck midnight, a sudden chill swept through the room. The lights flickered and the air grew thick with an unsettling energy. Everyone fell silent as if they felt it too. "What's wrong?" Hannah whispered to Mrs. Harrington, who seemed suddenly pale. "Nothing," Mrs. Harrington replied, though her voice quivered. "It's just the house." The wind howled outside, and from somewhere deep within the manor, a soft, mournful melody began to play, the tune of a lullaby, eerie and distant. The piano keys in the drawing room had not been touched, yet the music echoed through the halls, drifting from the attic. "Who's playing that?" Hannah asked, her heart pounding in her chest. The room grew colder, and a shadow flitted past the window. Mrs. Harrington's face turned ashen. "The piano hasn't been played in decades." Unable to resist, Hannah excused herself and ventured upstairs. The door to the attic was ajar, as if waiting for her. Inside, the temperature dropped dramatically, her breath visible in the frigid air. There, by an old, dust-covered piano, sat a figure, a young girl, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes empty and hollow. "Who are you?" Hannah whispered, her voice trembling. The girl didn't answer. She simply raised her fingers, ghostly white, to the piano keys. As she played the lullaby, Hannah felt the weight of the room press against her chest, a darkness closing in. Her vision blurred, and a whispered voice seemed to echo through her mind. "Leave this place, or join us forever." The music stopped. The girl vanished, and the door slammed shut behind Hannah. When she finally escaped the attic, she never spoke of that night again. But every Christmas, the Harringtons would leave a chair by the piano as if waiting for a guest who would never come back. The snow fell gently on the village, blanketing rooftops and cobblestone streets in white. The town square bustled with last-minute shoppers, their breaths misting in the cold air as they prepared for Christmas. But in the corner of the square stood a small, forgotten lantern shop. Its windows glowed faintly, casting flickering shadows on the snow, and the shopkeeper, Mr. Whitmore, arranged antique lanterns with practiced hands. There was something about this shop that felt out of time, something both charming and unnerving. Locals whispered about it, about how Mr. Whitmore always seemed to have the perfect lantern for anyone, even when they didn't know they needed one. As the clock in the church steeple struck 6, a knock came at the door. Mr. Whitmore looked up from his work, his gnarled hands steady as he set down a brass lantern. A woman stood on the snowy threshold, her cloak dusted with frost, her face obscured by the shadows of her hood. "May I help you?" he asked, his voice low. "I need a lantern," she replied, her voice soft but clear. Mr. Whitmore hesitated, uneasy at her presence. "What kind of lantern, madam?" She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Her voice was steady as she said, "One to light the path through memories." The words sent a shiver down his spine. Before he could protest, she pulled her hood back. Her face was pale, her eyes deep wells of sorrow. "I lost my way," she whispered, "and tonight is the longest night." Mr. Whitmore felt his hands tremble. He reached for a silver lantern sitting on the counter, its glass etched with intricate swirls of snowflakes. "This one," he said, his voice hoarse. She took the lantern, her hand colder than the wind outside. "Thank you," she said, and just as quickly as she had come, she turned toward the door. But as she stepped into the snow, the lantern's glow shifted. A trail of pale golden light spilled onto the ground, illuminating a path through the snow leading toward the woods. She turned to glance back at him, her face radiant and sad. "Sometimes," she murmured, "the light finds the lost." Before Mr. Whitmore could respond, she was gone, swallowed by the shadows of the woods. The lantern's glow remained for a moment before dimming, leaving the snow-covered village in peaceful quiet. Mr. Whitmore stared into the fading light, his heart uneasy. But as he closed the shop for the night, he felt a strange sense of peace. Perhaps the lantern had led her home, wherever that might have been. And maybe that was the true magic of Christmas, finding your way when the path feels lost. The snow fell in heavy sheets, muffling the quiet town in white. It was the kind of Christmas Eve that made everything look magical, except for the ominous feeling that lingered in the air, cold and sharp. Sarah stood by her window, watching her neighbors string lights and decorate their trees. Her parents were out visiting friends, and she was alone in the old family home. The house felt larger and emptier than usual, creaks from the wind pushing through the floorboards. Her phone buzzed, a message from her mother. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart. We'll be back by midnight." She put the phone down, but just as she did, a faint sound came from outside. At first, it was easy to ignore, just the sound of snow shifting or the wind rattling the shutters. But then it came again, a faint knocking. She froze. It couldn't be the wind. She stepped to the window and looked out into the white expanse, but there was nothing. The street was empty, lit only by the golden glow of nearby lampposts. She shook her head and went back to the couch. "Just my imagination," she whispered. Another knock. Her heart thudded in her chest. She knew she should ignore it, but the sound had a certain weight, a certain pull. With trembling hands, she wrapped her robe tighter and grabbed her phone. The knocking grew louder this time, more insistent. It sounded as if it was right by the door. Before she could think, she found herself at the door, hand on the knob, ready to check. But then she hesitated. What if it was a stranger? What if it was something else? A sharp breath escaped her lips. She pulled her hand away. Suddenly she heard it. A voice, low, raspy, not human. "Sarah!" The sound came from behind her. Whipping around, her heart in her throat, she saw it. A figure standing in the hallway. Pale, dressed in tattered red and white, the figure was gaunt, its eyes hollow, and its smile a jagged, broken line. Who are you?" she managed to stammer. The figure took a step forward, and she could hear its breathing, a wet, uneven sound. "Open the gift," it whispered. Before she could move, Sarah felt something drop at her feet, a small, perfectly wrapped box, crimson with gold ribbon. She hadn't heard it land. Slowly, she bent down, her hands trembling. She tore the paper. Inside, there was nothing but a small, black mirror. When she looked into it, her reflection wasn't her own. The figure stared back at her, empty-eyed, broken. Before she could scream, the mirror rippled. And then the figure was there with her, its cold hand on her shoulder. "Merry Christmas,"